One of the main reasons people start listening to podcasts is to feel connected to a community. So can we find a way to help build that community while promoting ourselves as guests? Hi, I'm Alfon. In the next few minutes, I'll show you a way to stand out as a guest. That will mean better conversations, more bookings, and more exposure. It's called quoting earlier episodes. The big day has arrived, and your pod match dashboard shows a new match. To call that recording a success, we'll focus on being able to quote earlier episodes in a smart way. But first, why quotes? Quotes are fun, memorable, and can move the conversation forward. That's why hosts enjoy good quotes from Lincoln, Shakespeare, or Beyonce. However, there is one type of quote that sounds like music to the ears of hosts. Quotes from their own show. Just imagining guests saying, and that reminds me of a great conversation you had on your show with an outstanding guest, James Brown. Here's what James said. You may not be looking for the promised land, but you might find it anyway, hand to hand, across the nation, living in America. And somewhere on the way, you might find out who you are. But in order to be able to play such quotes, first we must discover why hosts appreciate this approach, and then what's the best way to do it. So here's what happens when you're quoting or highlighting earlier episodes. Instantly, you build rapport with hosts. What could be more fulfilling to the host than highlighting their work like you just did? Encourage listeners to discover more episodes and subscribe. And you gain more exposure because when it's time to promote the episode, a host may promote it in a much more personal way. So what's the best way to place a quote? Let's take an example. One of the questions I get a lot as a guest is, what should entrepreneurs do to grow their network on LinkedIn? My answer is that you should focus on growing your real-life business metrics and not on the LinkedIn metrics. But then I could say, maybe we don't know how to determine our business metrics. I believe you discussed business metrics for small business when you interviewed Mac on your show XYZ, right? I would go and check it out. Notice how you basically fuse the quote in your answer. Daniel, never thought of that before. But how do I pick my quotes in the first place? Listen up. Before you record, re-listen to the show you'll be on. Pick a few episodes you find intriguing and listen. Why is that important? Because when you listen to the show, you can identify quotes and even create a cheat sheet. Here are 3 things a cheat sheet can list: topics, quotes, and questions. When the host and the guest discuss a topic you're passionate about, bang, you just write it down. When you hear a point that makes you think or laugh, boom, you add it to your cheat sheet. And when you hear a question that you'd like to answer, you write that question down. Go to the next level when there's a pre-recording chat. Just ask the host, if you had to recommend one episode to start with, which episode would that be? Or is there an episode that resonates with you or your tribe more than the others? When you listen to an episode recommended by the host, you can make an even bigger impact. Now, many guests listen to shows they'll be on, but usually their state of mind is passive. Why? Because they're not listening for anything specific. I want to change that for you today. When we know what we're looking for, even our minds find it easier to listen. So instead of being passive, listen with a purpose. Identify hooks that resonate with you. Pick a topic, 1-2 quotes, a question you heard. Cool. I guess I can come up with a few quotes. But how exactly do I mention those topics, quotes, or questions? Let's see how to incorporate, seed, place, or mention those quotes or topics. For example, when speaking with John Doe, you ask John a powerful question. You ask, how do we know that we need to hire a virtual assistant? Would it be okay to share my 2 cents about that topic? So now you see what I mean. You identify the question, and all you have to do is repeat the question and then provide your honest answer. Sweet. Let's do this from start to finish. First, let's see how not to do it, or how I did it initially. We'll call this take 1. Let me introduce our guest, Alex. Alex, welcome to our show. I've heard that song before. Yeah, Joe, thanks for having me. And I'd like to quote an earlier guest, Don Henley. Don said, and I quote, "Some dance to remember, some dance to forget. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. And by the way, Joe, how are you today?" Well, take one was horrible. That felt a bit like I was dumping my quote on the host and the listeners, didn't it? We do not shove a quote down their throat. You want context. Now, could we elegantly see the quote in a way that would feel less awkward and more natural? Here's how. Take two. Should leaders use such terms with their team? Of course not. As leaders, the words we employ are important. We need to communicate in a clear way. In fact, Jane, when you interviewed Robert Plant, you two discussed the importance of having an explicit message. There's a sign on the wall, but she wants to be sure, because sometimes words have two meanings. So take two wasn't that bad, was it? Let's do this one more time. Take three. But Kim, if we do have that imposter syndrome, how do you deal with it? I'm so glad you asked. Most people struggle with that. That reminds me of the chat you had with Freddie Mercury. You ask, can't we give ourselves one more chance? Why can't we give love, 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 under pressure? Pressure. The approach I just described to highlight earlier episode when you're the guest isn't perfect. I'm sure it can be improved, and I encourage you to tweak it to fit your own unique style. But after recording 100 episodes as a guest, virtually all thanks to Podmatch, I can say that quoting other episodes I had listened to made the most impact with hosts. Many hosts wanted to continue the conversation even after the show ended. As a guest, the idea behind referring to earlier episodes is both simple and powerful. Think about it. It works for all topics, from personal development to business. It works for all types of shows, from recorded shows, short, long ones, to live streams and video podcasts. It's totally free, and it works for veteran guests as well as newbies. Let's go deeper. How much extra time will you need to identify quotes and write them down? 0. Because you write the quotes as you listen to the show anyway. Now, I'm sure that if you've been on a few shows, you naturally mentioned an earlier episode. All I'm adding here is the suggestion to do it by design. Listen with a mission, identify quotes, integrate them in your natural answers, and do it by design. You have already seen how Podmatch helps you secure more bookings. If you read the Podmatch Guest Mastery book, you probably have a solid pre-recording routine that enables you to impact even more people. There are 2 types of guests. Which guest do you aspire to be? Type 1 guests are classic runaway guests. They give a thinly disguised pitch, have no clue who they're speaking with, and immediately rush elsewhere. Type 2 guests are more like friends. They remind listeners that the podcast is a whole continuum. They make the host proud of their work, and they demonstrate that they respect both the show, the audience, and the very first listener, namely the host. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. Personally, because my mind is now wired to look for hooks, topics, and questions, I can no longer listen to the show in the same way I used to. Yet so few guests do it. The best host to start with are experienced hosts. New hosts sometimes focus so much on their own list of questions that they aren't fully attentive to your answer. Which begs the following question. Daniel, what if the host misses the point or even doesn't seem to recognize the quote? What do we do? So let me suggest 3 ways to help the host weigh in immediately when we mention a quote. Before you go live, say something like, I really liked your chat with Jane Doe. Is it okay if I refer to it today? You help the host by taking away the element of surprise. When mentioning the quote, request the host's permission. Jane, would it be okay if I refer to my favorite quote or episode from your show? You ask a yes-no question and then stop speaking. What you get is a yes, with the host listening on their toes. Of course, what is your favorite episode or quote? And lastly, after the quote, pause. This will help the host identify the cue, just like you probably identify one of the songs I quoted today. Want to know what my favorite scenario is? It's when hosts say, yeah, that was a great episode, one of my favorites. Anyone interested in that topic should really check it out. I think it's episode 7, and the host, the guest's full name is spelled like this. You listen with a mission, you identify quotes, and you integrate them into your natural answers. That's how you compel listeners to discover more episodes. That's how you make new listeners who came for the host, came for the guest, stay for the host. Hosts love it when you do it. You just promoted their show. Now is the time to suggest a simple step you can take today. When listening to an episode of your next booking, don't listen to it aimlessly. Have fun. Challenge yourself. If I had to pick one, what is the one topic that resonates with me? What is the one quote that made me think? And what is the one question that I would like to answer? One topic, one quote, one question. Now, a warning. If you prepared a bunch of topics, quotes, or questions, don't feel you need to mention all of them. If you feel overwhelmed, pick only one item to mention. One quote that blends in naturally is best. The question to ask is this: will this quote move the conversation forward, yes or no? Put another way, if you're interested in becoming a good speaker, first you must become a good listener. Let's make this even simpler. Start small, listen to one episode, and pick one topic. Here's something you can immediately apply. You often know at least one or two of the questions the host will ask you, right? Examine those questions and ask yourself, in my current answer, where can I naturally weave that topic? Takeaway time. Next time you're securing a recording through Podmatch, listen to the show with the aim to identify a hook. Finally, it's time to answer the questions we started with. Can we find a way to help build that community while promoting ourselves as guests? I'd really like to quote an earlier episode of Podcasting Made Simple. The second most common reason people start listening to podcasts is to feel connected to a community. By honoring the show's past, you further strengthen the sense of belonging to an intimate community with a shared experience. And an excellent way to promote ourselves as guests may be to promote the show we're on. Happy hosts promote your episode in a more personal way. Happy hosts can hire you. And happy hosts can recommend you to other hosts. So make hosts happy, just promote the show. Thank you.